This issue is criminal defense attorney David Seltzer. David, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Good morning, Christy. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. So let's answer that question. Is there enough here to convict?
I do not believe there's enough here to convict under manslaughter. I don't even believe there's enough here to convict under the lesser included negligent homicide case. To talk about a substantial risk and whether he knew, or a perceived risk, whether he should have known, it's not possible. Think about it from the other day when you went to the sweat lodge. Did you go into the sweat lodge thinking you were going to die? No, you went into the sweat lodge because it was an experience. You went to experience it. No one thinks they're going to die when they go into a sweat lodge. And to put that on James Ray and to say now James Ray should have known that death was a possibility and he should be now criminally charged doesn't work for me.
But negligent homicide would absolve him of that, that pre-notion that he should have known somebody would have died. But the fact is, 3 people did die. So somebody's going to say, look, somebody has to be responsible for that. Is there not some negligence on James Ray's part?
No, I don't believe there is negligence on James Ray's part. How can James Ray, who's done sweat lodges before, perceive or have any negligent responsibility here when something happened? It's the eggshell victim. You get your victim as they come, and this is should be litigated in the civil avenue. There are no criminal charges that should be brought in this case. So
you think this is strictly a civil case? How strong of a civil case is it, in your opinion?
It's a great civil case. Civil case, the burden is less. Preponderance of the evidence, 51%, 49%. The criminal burden is beyond a reasonable doubt. You have such a higher burden here, there's no way this jury can convict. Now, the defense has a lot of things going for it. They only need to get one juror. One juror needs to say, this case does not belong here, and they win. And I believe they're going to get that juror.
So if they go to civil court, where do you think James Ray's vulnerable in that regard?
If James Ray's defense team in civil court is doing this the right way, this won't get to court. They'll settle out of court. So it's a completely different venue as to how you deal with that issue.
Now, we've been talking about the fact that, yes, people signed a waiver. They weren't forced to participate, nor were they forced to stay. Good things, obviously, for the defense. But in the defense's case, it also says, you know, people are testifying that they weren't prepared. They weren't really told what was going to happen. They weren't asked about any health conditions that could have complicated matters when they were in there, and that there was a nurse outside the tent that was helping people. So if there was a nurse, does it not implicate in some way that James Ray knew there could be health risks?
I don't believe that argument is valid, because look at it this way. In everything we do in life, we sign waivers. We live in a society where it's all about CYA. Whatever we do, we sign. We play hockey, we sign. We go to certain sporting events that cause issues, we sign a waiver. There's always risks inherent in anything we do in life. They're now saying just because someone died, he should be held responsible. I don't believe it. If you go play ice hockey and you sign a waiver for your son, and God forbid something happens or you die, should the rink be held criminally responsible for your actions for something that you did on the ice? No. You took a risk. You did something. Stuff happens. It's part of life.
Right. Now, people say, Ray's, there's no doubt about it. I mean, he's pretty charismatic. He was a star to a lot of people, and that he's an experienced speaker. So putting him on the stand might be a good thing because he will be very adroit at being able to get through to people. On the opposite side of that, conversely, some people may say, oh, he is well-versed, he is well-spoken. Is he believable? Would he be believable if you put him on the stand? What do you think?
I think he would be believable. I do agree with what you're saying about him being a motivational speaker. It's his job to get people to believe him. So yes, the jury may perceive whether, you know, there's truth in that. But I believe the prosecution is not going to be able to reach their burden before the defense case even gets there. I believe the defense is going to have such a strong argument in closing before they get there that they're going to have to make the decision as to whether they put him on or not. I don't know if they're going to have to put him on. From what I'm seeing to date, I haven't seen anything that would lead me as a juror to convict.
So what do you think the prosecution would need to present to make this convictable in your eyes?
Some form of actual negligence, some form of actual knowledge that he knew something he was doing in that tent was make these people sick or die. And I don't think they can have it. There's already been testimony that he's done several sweat lodges before. Furthermore, there was testimony by one of the last witnesses yesterday, Mr. Mayrivar, that he didn't set up the tent. He didn't put it together. He's not the one who built it. So maybe there is negligence, maybe but it's on the part of somebody else.
What would how accountable would he be in a civil suit? I mean, when you talk about the deaths of 3 people, what kind of a monetary figure would be fair if he was going to have to pay out, do you think?
You can't put a price on someone's life.
Right.
You know, it's priceless, someone's life. So it really just depends on the circumstances behind each individual person who unfortunately passed away. I can't sit here and predict what the settlements are going to be. I guarantee you, if there are settlements or if they're already done, they're probably confidential. We'll never know what they were. But they're going to settle. As to what level, you know, I'd probably predict 7 figures, but I can't tell you where.
Okay. David Seltzer, criminal defense attorney. It was so good to have you with us today, David. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. Anytime.
Sure, we appreciate it.